the air at Fort Jericho, home to the infamous Aegis selection course known as the Crucible, was thin and sharp, tasting of pine, sweat, and iron. What began as a confident cohort of 100 of the military's finest had been whittled down to a haggard force. The relentless physical and psychological attrition was designed to forge diamonds, but it often just created shattered stones. Among the survivors was candidate Maya Castillo, a ghost in the formation. She was deliberately average in every observable metric, not the fastest, not the strongest, not the loudest. Her quiet presence and withdrawn nature made her an island in a sea of aggressive ambition, a perfect nail sticking up, just begging to be hammered down. And the man holding the hammer was Master Sergeant Croft, a veteran forged in the fires of a dozen forgotten conflicts. Croft was a monument of muscle and scar tissue, with a voice that sounded like gravel grinding against bone. To him, the selection course was a sacred rite, a filter to purify the ranks of the Aegis program. He saw Castillo not just as a candidate, but as a contagion, her very presence, a result of what he sneeringly called New Era recruitment initiatives, was a personal insult to his life's work. He believed the unforgiving mathematics of combat had no room for diversity quotas or perceived weakness. Captain Eva Rostova, the officer overseeing the selection, watched from the periphery. Her gaze was sharp, missing nothing. She observed as Croft made Castillo his personal project. He would single her out during brutal pack marches, adding sandbags to her rucksack to build character. He'd publicly critique her rifle handling, her posture, her very existence in his sacred space. Today's lesson in humiliation began after a land navigation exercise. The previous night, Castillo's compass had been accidentally damaged, and her map subtly altered. She had spent the entire night navigating treacherous terrain, arriving back at the base just minutes before the final cutoff, her face etched with exhaustion, but her eyes betraying nothing. "Look at her," Croft bellowed, his voice echoing across the training yard as the 42 candidates stood in a weary formation. He jabbed a thick finger in Castillo's direction. "This is what happens when we lower the bar. This is the inclusion they want. We are training killers, not social workers. Out here, weakness gets people killed. Her weakness will get you killed." The other candidates shifted uncomfortably. Most avoided her gaze, complicit in their silence. A few shot her looks of pity, while others wore faint smirks of superiority. They were all exhausted, all desperate to survive. And Castillo was the designated sacrifice that kept the wolves at bay. Through it all, Maya Castillo remained a statue of stoicism. Her face was a carefully blank canvas, a mask of meek submission she had perfected over weeks of relentless abuse. She absorbed the verbal blows, the sabotage, the isolation, without a single crack in her facade. Inside, however, a cold, patient fire burned, waiting for the precise moment to ignite. The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty grounds of the combatives' pit, a place affectionately nicknamed the meat grinder. The curriculum shifted from the slow burn of endurance to the explosive violence of close-quarters combat. For Master Sergeant Croft, it was the perfect theater for the final act of Castillo's public shaming. He intended to break her, not just physically, but spiritually, in front of everyone. "All right, ladies," Croft sneered, the term a deliberate insult to the hardened soldiers before him. "Time to see who has some fight in them. Riley, Castillo, front and center." Jocks Riley, a mountain of a man who looked like he had been chiseled from granite, lumbered forward. He was the largest and strongest recruit in the cohort, a gentle giant outside the pit, but a force of nature when unleashed. He glanced at Castillo, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Sir," Riley began, his voice a low rumble. "With all due respect, ... Your respect is noted and dismiss," Riley Croft cut him off, his eyes glinting with malice. "Your orders are to engage the target with maximum force. Put her on her back." "Is that understood?" Riley hesitated for a fraction of a second, then gave a curt nod. The candidates formed a circle, their faces a mixture of anticipation and dread. The first engagement was brutally quick. Riley, following orders, drove forward with overwhelming force, sweeping Castillo's legs and planting her hard into the packed dirt. He helped her up, whispering a barely audible sorry. Castillo just nodded, her breathing steady, her eyes fixed on Croft. Again, Croft barked. The second takedown was a repeat of the first, a demonstration of pure physics. Riley's mass and technique were simply too much. Castillo hit the ground even harder, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of her mouth. She wiped it away with the back of her hand and rose to her feet, her expression unchanged. There was no fear, no anger, no pain. There was only a profound and unsettling stillness. Her refusal to break infuriated Croft. This wasn't going according to his script. He wanted tears. He wanted her to quit, to give him the satisfaction of being right. Pathetic, he roared, shoving Riley aside. You're holding back. That's not how you neutralize a threat. That's how you get a knife in the ribs. Watch and learn. I'll demonstrate a proper takedown. He moved on Castillo with a speed that belied his size. He didn't use technique. He used pure, unrestrained violence. He grabbed her by the collar, slamming her face first into the dirt with a sickening thud. He drove his knee into her spine and then ground his boot into the back of her neck, pinning her to the ground for the benefit of the silent, watching circle of recruits. In a real fight, he lectured, his voice heavy with contempt as he pressed down harder. There is no mercy. Mercy is a weakness you cannot afford. You dominate. You break your enemy completely. Sute never ever think about getting back up. Elianda dun his face close to her ear. You hear me, Castillo? You are broken. But in that instant, as he pontificated about power, the dynamic of the universe shifted. It was a change so swift, so imperceptibly, that no one saw it coming. The meek, submissive recruit beneath his boot vanished. As Croft began to lift his weight, intending to haul her up for a final dismissal, Castillo exploded. It wasn't a struggle, it was a reversal, as fluid and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. In a blur of motion that seemed to defy physics, her body coiled and unwound. An arm snaked around his ankle, a leg hooked his knee. His balance point, which he had held with such arrogant certainty, was suddenly gone. Before he could even process what was happening, he was on his back. The wind knocked out of him, and Castillo was on top of him. Her transition was flawless. She moved from the ankle lock to a full mount. Her hips locked on his, neutralizing his strength advantage. And then, with breathtaking speed, she cinched in a rear naked choke. The entire training yard fell into a stunned, dead silence. The only sound was the rasping, panicked gasp of Master Sergeant Croft as his air supply was expertly cut off. The invincible instructor, the gatekeeper of the Aegis program, was trapped, held helpless by the one person he had deemed utterly insignificant. With Master Sergeant Croft turning a shade of purple at her feet, the woman everyone knew as Candidate Castillo underwent a startling metamorphosis. The mask of the meek, unremarkable recruit dissolved, replaced by an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. She held the chokehold with practiced ease, her eyes, now cold and analytical, scanning the shocked faces of the recruits, ringing the pit. She was no longer the prey. She was the apex predator, and she had just revealed her teeth. A single set of footsteps broke the spellbound silence. Captain Eva Rostova strode into the center of the pit, her face impassive, her eyes locked on Castillo. "Is Nightshade Protocol active?" Rostova asked, her voice calm and clear, using a phrase that meant nothing to the bewildered candidates. Castillo released her hold, letting Croft slump to the ground, gasping and choking for air. She rose gracefully to her feet, her posture changing from a defensive crouch to a commanding stance. "Protocol is active, Captain," she replied, and her voice was a revelation in itself. It was no longer the quiet, hesitant tone of a struggling recruit. It was crisp, clear, and resonant with a command presence that sent a shiver down the spines of every soldier present. What happened next shattered their understanding of the world. Captain Rostova, an officer they respected and feared, snapped to attention. She executed a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. "Major Castillo," Rostova said, her voice ringing with formality. "Welcome to the Crucible." She turned to the dumbfounded assembly. "Candidates, Allow me to introduce you to Major Maya Castillo, decorated operator from the clandestine unit, Project Night. She was never a candidate here. She was the test. A wave of disbelief and dawning comprehension washed over the recruits. They looked from the sputtering, humiliated Master Sergeant Croft on the ground to the woman who now stood as his clear superior. Restova continued, her words cutting through the stunned silence. Major Castillo's mission was to conduct a deep-level cultural and character assessment of this selection program. For 27 days, she has been your ghost, your shadow. Her purpose was not to pass this course, but to evaluate it. She was here to see what you would do, to see how you would treat someone you perceived as weak, as an outsider, as insignificant. She was here to see your true character when you thought no one of importance was watching. The weight of the revelation landed like a physical blow. Every act of cruelty, every whispered insult, every moment of silent complicity was now cast in a horrifying new light. They hadn't been hazing a fellow candidate. They had been showing their true colors to a senior operator on a covert mission, and they had failed their test in spectacular fashion. Major Maya Castillo surveyed the sea of shocked and shamed faces before her. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a weight that none of them had ever heard from her. It was the voice of a leader who had seen the best and worst of humanity in the darkest corners of the world. For the past 4 weeks, you have been told that strength is about how much you can carry, how fast you can run, how well you can fight, she began, her gaze sweeping across the formation, seeming to lock onto every individual's eyes simultaneously. That is a component. It is the baseline, but it is not the true measure of an operator in the Aegis program. The true standard, the one that truly matters, is character. It's not about how you act under the watchful eyes of your instructors. It's about how you behave when you think no one of consequence is watching. Her eyes scanned the crowd, finally settling on 3 individuals who stood slightly apart from the others, their faces reflecting confusion, but not guilt. Most of you failed that test, Castillo stated, her voice devoid of malice, but heavy with disappointment. You confused cruelty with strength. You saw a target and, led by your instructor, you pounced. You participated in the mockery. You enabled the abuse through your silence, believing it would earn you a place here. But a few of you did not. She pointed a finger. Carter, on day 12 during the forced march, you accidentally dropped your water canteen next to me after you saw mine had been emptied. You did it without a word, expecting nothing in return. Her finger moved. Reyes, you're a medic, 3 times. You approached me after training hours to offer medical tape and antiseptic for injuries you knew I had UN reported, knowing it could get you flagged for helping someone the instructors were trying to wash out. And finally, Jin, during the land navigation exercise, when my compass was broken, you risked your own time to confirm your bearings near my position, pointing me in the right direction with a simple nod. An act of quiet integrity. She looked at the 3 men: Ben Ram Carter, Sofia Doc Reyes, and Leo Gostin. You 3 demonstrated moral courage. You offered help without seeking reward. You refused to participate in the pack mentality. You showed that your character is stronger than your ambition. You are the standard. Her gaze then turned back to the rest of the cohort, her expression hardening. The rest of you are dismissed from this course. You are unfit for the responsibilities that come with this unit. You confuse sadism with leadership and bullying with bonding. Your journey to join Aegis ends today. A stunned silence fell over the dismissed candidates. Their dream had just been publicly executed. Finally, Castillo's eyes fell upon the still-wreathing Master Sergeant Croft, who was now being helped to his feet by a stone-faced captain. Master Sergeant Castillo sah, her voice dropping to an icy calm. General Thorne is expecting you in his office. I suggest you don't keep him waiting. Croft stared at her, his face a storm of confusion, rage, and humiliation. You... ... Who the hell are you? I'm the woman who just ended your career, she replied without a trace of emotion. It was over the moment you decided that grinding a recruiter's face into the dirt was a valid training technique. You're not a leader, you're a sadist. And in the new Aegis program, there's no room for either. In the sterile, quiet confines of General Elias Thorne's office, Major Castillo delivered her assessment. There was no deference in her tone, only the blunt, unvarnished truth of a field report. Captain Rostova stood by, a silent witness. "The program is fundamentally broken," General Castillo stated, her hands clasped behind her back. "It's not forging elite operators. It's creating a culture of toxicity. It selects for aggression and obedience to authority, even corrupt authority. It teaches soldiers that brutality is a synonym for strength, and that compassion is a liability. Master Sergeant Croft isn't an anomaly. He's the system's ideal product general. Tournay man whose face seemed carved from old, weathered oak, listened without interruption. He ran a hand over his silver hair, a deep sigh escaping his lips. That confirms our worst fears. Major, we've been seeing the downstream effects for years. Higher rates of misconduct, ethics violations, a breakdown in unit cohesion on sensitive deployments. The old school methods were creating monsters, not guardians. We knew we had to expose the rot at the core, but any internal review would have been met with a wall of silence. We needed someone to see it from the inside, an operative no one would ever see coming. He gestured toward the window, which overlooked the main parade ground. A military police vehicle was parked discreetly near the barracks. 2 MPs were escorting a shell-shocked Gunnars Croft, now in his dress uniform, from the building. His career, a source of immense pride and terror, was over, ending not with a bang on the battlefield, but with a quiet, ignominious dismissal. "Your recommendation, Major?" Thorne asked, turning his piercing gaze back to her. "Carter, Reyes, and Jin are the only 3 candidates ready to advance," Castillo answered without hesitation. "They possess the one quality this program has been actively filtering out: integrity. I recommend we wash out the rest and start again, with a new philosophy. Quality over quantity, General. Always." Thorne nodded slowly. 27 days of that kind of abuse. That's a feat in itself, Major. Croft pushed you to the absolute limit. A small, knowing smile touched Castillo's lips. "For the first time, with all due respect, General," she said, her voice softening slightly, "being underestimated has always been my greatest strategic advantage. No one ever sees the ghost in the ranks until it's too late." The next dawn broke over Fort Jericho with a renewed clarity. The air felt cleaner, lighter. The oppressive cloud of fear and intimidation that had hung over the Crucible seemed to have lifted with Croft's departure. On a quiet training field, Maya Castillo stood before the 3 remaining recruits: Carter, Reyes, and Jin. There were no instructors screaming, no impossible tasks, just a quiet respect of a senior operator for 3 men who had passed a test they didn't even know they were taking. "Kata," she began, addressing him directly, "when you shared your water, you demonstrated the first principle of our creed. A warrior takes care of their own, especially when it costs them something." She turned to Reyes. "Doc, your willingness to offer aid in secret, risking your own standing, showed that your duty to heal and protect is more important than your desire to be accepted by the pack. That's medical and moral integrity." Finally, she looked at Jin. "Ghost, your quiet intervention during the navigation course was the epitome of silent professionalism. You didn't seek credit. You saw a teammate in trouble and you corrected the problem without fanfare. That is the essence of a quiet professional." The 3 men stood straighter, the praise from this formidable woman meaning more than any medal or promotion. Later that day, in a secure, soundproof briefing room deep within the command building, the true scope of their situation was revealed. Major Castillo and Captain Rostova stood before a large digital display. "What you've experienced was more than just an evaluation," Castillo explained, her tone shifting to that of a mission commander. "It was the first phase of a sweeping new initiative. We call it Project Vanguard." On the screen behind her, a complex flowchart appeared, detailing plans to overhaul the entire Special Operations selection and training pipeline, from recruitment to deployment. "The old way is broken," Captain Rostova added, stepping forward. "We need to build a new generation of operators, ones who understand that true strength is found not in brutality, but in character, intelligence, and moral courage. We need thinkers and guardians, not just thugs. Castillo locked eyes with each of the three men. Which brings us to you. You have a choice. You've passed this selection by a standard higher than anyone before you. You can proceed with standard qualification and join an Aegis team. Or, you can join us, become the foundation of Project Vanguard. You'll be the first wave. The architects of a new culture, tasked with reforming this community from within. The path will be harder, and you will face resistance you cannot imagine. But you will have the chance to redefine what it means to be an elite operator for generations to come. There was no hesitation. Three voices, quiet but firm, spoke as one. We're in. The first tremor of resistance from the old guard came faster and harder than expected. Colonel Marcus Thorne, General Thorne's younger, more belligerent brother and a powerful commander with a near-mythical combat record, stormed into the Project Vanguard command center. He was the embodiment of the brutal, break them down to build them up philosophy that Castillo was there to dismantle. He bypassed Captain Rostova completely, planting his hands on Castillo's desk, his face a mask of fury. Major, what in the hell do you think you're doing? You waltzed onto my training grounds, undermined my command structure, and publicly humiliated a decorated master sergeant with more combat experience than you have years on this earth. Castillo didn't flinch. She slowly rose from her chair, her 5'7" frame seeming to match his 6'3" in sheer presence. Colonel, I conducted a mission under the direct authority of General Thorne. Master Sergeant Croft humiliated himself. I simply provided the stage. This is semantics. Thorne rayed, his voice bouncing off the cinder block walls. You're bringing in this soft, psychological nonsense. We're not training guidance counselors. We forge weapons of war. The only way to do that is to burn away the weakness, to break a man down to his core and rebuild him as something stronger. That's where your philosophy and mine diverge, Colonel Castillo countered, her voice dangerously calm. You think breaking people builds strength. I know for a fact that it only creates broken people who are good at hiding the cracks. True leadership doesn't break anyone. It identifies potential and builds people up. It inspires them to be stronger than they ever thought they could be. It was then that Thorne noticed the small, framed photos on the corner of her desk. It was of a younger Castillo, with a legendary mustachioed operator. Her father, Command Sergeant Major Pops Castillo, a man Thorne had served with and revered. The realization that he was lecturing a legacy, a woman born and raised in the shadow of the community's greatest, took some of the wind out of his sails. Your father would have understood, he grumbled, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. My father, she corrected him, taught me that the strongest man isn't the one who can dish out the most pain, but the one who can absorb the most and still choose to protect others. You would do well to remember that. Thorne straightened up, his eyes narrowed. This new way of yours won't last. The first time one of your morally courageous operators hesitates in a firefight, this whole project will come crashing down. He turned and strode out, leaving a final warning hanging in the air. I'll be watching! I know, Castillo said to the empty doorway. I'm counting on it. She was playing a long game, and she had no intention of asking for his permission to win. The qualification course designed by Major Castillo and Captain Rostova for Carter, Reyes, and Jin was unlike anything in the Special Operations playbook. It was exponentially more demanding than the Crucible, but in a fundamentally different way. The physical stress was immense. Grilling HEAL team marches, complex underwater demolitions, and surgical hostage rescue simulations where a single mistake meant failure. But the true test was mental and ethical. Instead of being punished for failure, they were mentored through it. After a botched raid simulation, Castillo wouldn't scream at them. She would sit them down and force them to dissect every decision, every hesitation, every failure in communication, until they understood the why behind their mistakes. The training focused not just on tactical excellence, but on advanced observation, ethical decision-making under fire, and the complex psychology of leading men in combat. She pushed them to their absolute limits, proving that the highest standards of performance could be achieved through constructive, relentless mentorship, not destructive humiliation. They were being forged into a new kind of weapon, a blade that was not only sharp and strong but also wielded with wisdom and restraint. The culmination of their training took place at a remote, secluded marker in the mountains. Simple, weathered stone where Castillo's father had once trained her as a teenager, teaching her the core principles of his craft. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the valley, she shared with them the final and most important lesson. My father taught me that our skills, our strength, our lethality, they don't make us superior, she said, her voice quiet and reflective. They make us responsible. They are tools, and the only noble purpose for a tool like us is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. True strength protects, it builds, it shields. The men we fight, they use their strength to destroy, to dominate, to instill fear. We must always be better than them. Never forget that. In that moment under the vast, silent sky, Carter Reyes and Jin understood. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were guardians. There was no public graduation ceremony. In a small, private gathering, General Thorne presented Carter, Reyes, and Jin with their Aegis qualifications. He shook their hands, his eyes conveying a newfound respect. They were the first graduates of a program that might just save the soul of his command. Their first assignments were a surprise. They were not being sent to join a single team as a new Crucible unit. They were being deployed separately, scattered to the Wind One to a counter-terrorism team in the Middle East, another to a counter-narcotics unit in South America, and the third to a maritime interdiction group in Southeast Asia. On paper, they were simply new, junior operators, the lowest men on the totem pole. In reality, they were the vanguard of Project Vanguard. Major Castillo briefed them one last time in the secure facility. Your mission is twofold, she instructed, her demeanor all business. First, you will be the best operators you can be. Earn the respect of your teammates through competence and hard work. Second, you are my eyes and ears. You will observe your team dynamics, the leadership styles of your superiors, and the underlying culture of your units. You will report back on the good, the bad, and the ugly. You are not there to be whistleblowers or spies. You are data gathering assets. She paused, letting the weight of their responsibilities settle in. Your primary mission is not to win every fight. It is to ensure that the moments of abuse, of toxic leadership, of moral compromise, the very things that we are trying to eradicate, no longer happen in the shadows. From now on, they will have consequences. They nodded, their faces grim with determination. They were now the ghosts in the ranks, silent observers tasked with holding the line, not just against the enemy, but against the darkness within their own community. With her 3 new operators dispatched across the globe, Major Castillo met with General Thorne for her next assignment. He slid a folder across his desk. It was a deployment order. Colonel Thorne's unit, the general said, his voice grave. He's leading a task force on a heist mission in North Africa. He requested an additional operator with your specific skill set. He doesn't know you're the one filling the billet. Castillo looked at the folder, then back at the general. This was the ultimate challenge, the most dangerous phase of her mission. She would be operating directly under the command of the man most hostile to her reforms, a man who represented everything she was fighting against. He will be watching your every move, General Thorne warned, looking for any excuse, any hesitation, to prove his philosophy right and declare Project Vanguard a failure. Let him watch, Castillo replied, a familiar, confident, calm settling over her. She picked up the folder, her decision already made. Thorne would see her as a threat, a political operative sent by his brother. He would underestimate her as a soldier, focusing on her gender and her soft ideas about leadership. He would see her as a weakness. And Sek knew, with absolute certainty, that her ability to be underestimated remained her greatest weapon. The story concluded not with an ending, but with a new beginning. Major Maya Castillo was accepting the challenge, prepared to be the ghost in the ranks once more, ready to rise from the dirt again, understanding that deep, systemic change never comes from a sweeping revolution, but from a single, unwavering presence in the very heart of the opposition. This story, at its core, is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about dominance, aggression, or the ability to impose your will on others. It's about character, integrity, and moral courage. It's about how you choose to act when you have power over someone, especially when you believe no one is watching. Cruelty is not strength. It is a profound weakness, a mask worn by those who are insecure in their own abilities, in our own lives, whether in the workplace, in our families, or in our communities. We are often faced with our own versions of the Crucible. We see people being marginalized, overlooked, or underestimated. We have a choice in those moments. Do we join the pack, stay silent to protect ourselves, or do we, like Carter, Reyes, and Jin, perform those small, quiet acts of integrity that define who we truly are? True leadership isn't about a title or a position. It's about the courage to do the right thing, even when it's difficult or unpopular. It's about building people up, not breaking them down. And for anyone who has ever felt underestimated, remember Maya Castillo. Your greatest strength may very well be the fact that they don't see you coming. Use it. Cultivate your skills in the shadows. Remain patient. And when the moment is right, let your competence and character speak for themselves. The silence you command will be more powerful than any noise they could ever make. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where you saw someone being unfairly targeted? What did you do? Have you ever felt underestimated? And how did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I wish you all good health, strength of character, and the courage to be a guardian in your own lives. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content that explores the deeper truths of the human spirit.